Hey, it's Benjie Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me directly through benjie@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is an internationally syndicated show because of viewers like you. We're available across all major podcast distributors, and people, I mean it when I say it, we would not be here without you, and it doesn't get missed that is the case, all right? Please continue to show that support. We are truly indebted to you because of it, and if you continue to follow, we're gonna continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in because we are thoroughly looking forward to showcasing this next guest on our network. And on the line with us today, we have the impressive T.F. Fig. Now, many of you may remember Tim when he was on our network previously. Now, last time we discussed his impressive book, The Lady Anne Elliot. Well, today we're discussing another one of his novels called Sofia and Richard, a Regency Romance Book 1. It's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the regular online book resellers. You know where to go, but check out his personal website because it's going to be a one-stop shop for it all. That's tffig.com. You're going to gather more information on him, more information on these impressive novels, as well as find the hyperlink set up to take you to the purchasing pages. People, I'm telling you, it's one you got to check out. Again, that's tffig.com. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out the fact that Tim was brought to our network, People of Distinction, today by one of the best advertising firms in the business and people you already know. I'm talking about Quantum Discovery. So for my writers out there who have gone through their process creating your masterpiece, and now you've done it, okay? You need help moving the book that you just finished developing though. Contact Quantum Discovery, people. They're one of the best in the business to do it, and this is exactly what they specialize in. So head on over to quantumdiscovery.net and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is gonna help you do just that. And like I said, people, it is truly a delight to have Tim back here on the line with us. I mean, there's so much that we're going to uncover here today. The names, the journey, all may sound very familiar, and if it does, that's because you're probably a Jane Austen fan who has captured imaginations for decades, if not centuries, right? I mean, Jane Austen was truly a remarkable individual, and so many people continue to just revel in her work, Tim being one of them. But he was so impressed by Jane Austen's work, he decided to continue that legacy and actually continue those storylines, which I love. I'm here for it, man. I really am impressed by what this man has been able to do and continues to do. You're going to want to sit back and strap in for this one. We have a lot to discuss. Tim is the expert. Let's bring him here with us. First and foremost, Tim, welcome back to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for having me back.
Listen, it is an absolute pleasure. Tim, when the opportunity presented itself to have you as a guest, again, we jumped at it. We realized, A, your books are magnificent, but B, we were receiving so many favorable responses across all of our platforms, it was a no-brainer. We had to invite you back on. Our audience wouldn't let us do anything otherwise, right? But no, man, listen, joking aside, it truly is a pleasure. What you've done with these books are masterful. You are truly an impressive individual, and we're thoroughly looking forward to this. Now, for the members of our listening audience that missed the previous time you were with us, let's start off at the ground floor, man. Let's start off at the foundation. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. Who is T.F. Fig?
T.F. Fig. So I originally grew up in the New York City area. So I'm an East Coast boy, street boy, right? I was in college, and then I joined the service, the Air Force, for a few years. I liked the Midwest. When I finished my tour, I finished college out this way, and I've been living here ever since. I live on a 5-acre ranch, horses, chickens, ducks. My wife's British, and my daughter lives with us.
I love it. I love it. You know, Tim, as you and I were talking on the pre-screening call, I was telling you my wife and I recently took a trip to Denver. And listen, as a side note, as just a little shameless plug here for you listening in, if you haven't been to Denver, you need to check it out. There are sights to behold. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous place. I mean, the mountains, the hikes, there's so much natural beauty there. Denver, Colorado needs to be on your bucket list if you haven't already been. Head on over there and definitely check it out. But, you know, Tim, again, welcome back to People of Distinction, man. We're really looking forward to this. Again, last time we discussed the Lady Anne Elliot. Today we're discussing Sofia and Richard, a Regency romance, book one. And I love the fact that you put the book one there. Because, of course, if it's a book one, then there must be something else after that. That leads us to the future. We'll cover that in just a few moments. But first and foremost, let's start off by learning a little bit more about this book. Tell us about the words on those pages.
Right. So book one is a Regency period romance, somewhere around between 1790 and mid-1800s time period. And it really revolves around two themes. The first theme has to do with an admiral and his wife, Admiral James, and his wife, Anne. Mm-hmm. They have a son named Richard, and the book starts with Admiral retiring. He's going to retire that day. And he spent 30 years in the Royal Navy. He's served the crown quite well. He's a knight of the realm, but he doesn't use his title unless he's at the royal court, which he's often invited to, or he's on official crown business. So you see him, he's like Admiral James, so what? You know, and his wife is aristocracy. And so she's a lady, but she's just full of Anne, mm-hmm. right? Kind of. So therefore, when they decide to retire in Somerset, which is where they grew up together, they buy a beautiful estate called Charlton. And the neighborhood is full of folks that have titles. There's an estate next to theirs called Highbury. Mm-hmm. And at that estate are the Altons. And it's a baron and a baroness. And the baron is Edward Baron and Lady Victoria. And they have a daughter named Sophia. So now you're starting to see Sofia and Richard, right? The kids. Yeah. And you're seeing two families. Victoria asks her husband, do we know who the new owners of Charlton Estate are? And Baron says, it's an admiral. And the wife has a comment. She comes back, I'm going to read this comment to you. She comes back and she says, the husband says, I believe they are the Hawks of Portsmouth. That is an Admiral James Hawke, retired, and the wife and son, Richard, 8 or 9 of age. Mentions Edward, was Sophia listening carefully. I wish, the wife says, Lady Victoria, I wish wealthy Navy folk would not try to buy their way into aristocracy by purchasing grand estate. Next thing you know, they'll hold the ball and expect us to come. And so you're already getting the first theme. And the first theme is you have a group of people who have titles, but they're never invited to the royal court. Even though they're part of society, who's the real society? The knight of the realm, but he doesn't use his title because he knows who he is and the wife knows who she is. Yeah. So we're going to find that there's going to be revelations in the book as it goes along, and the folks in the neighborhood thinking the Hawks are beneath us are going to realize it's the opposite. And the people that come to visit them at the Charlton Estate, when they hold the ball, there are people coming in from London, and the prince and the princess royal family know them, and they come to the ball, and suddenly they realize they're out of their depth. So that's one theme. The next theme is Sofia and Richard. They get to meet each other because of their love for horses. So when the Hawks move into Charlton, Richard tells his dad, I'm going to saddle up Fire and his horse, and I'm going to kind of take a tour around the estate and kind of learn it a little bit and see what's there.
I also want to see this place called the Commons. So Baltimore Estate is a especially beautiful area called the Commons. And so this area has a wood, beautiful pastures, streams running through it, and the gate is kept open to the Highbury estate so that Sophia, who's a horse lover and rider herself, and if the day is warm and it's nice, typically she rides a horse to the Commons, and she's either reading or painting or doing something of that nature there. And he's not expecting to see her, but he just happens to be in there. They get to meet, and so I'm going to read just a paragraph or two so that you can see what that meeting is like.
Yeah.
So Richard's riding his horse. He has an Arabian, by the way, which was gifted to his dad when he was on crown business in the Arabias. And so he comes into the Commons area and he gets this sound, "You there, that is a beautiful horse. I don't think I have ever seen one of its kind in these parts. What breed is she? What is her name?" asked Sophia, surprising Richard and his horse, who become taut and turned to face the voice and assess the threat. "Oh, you startled me in fire. I didn't see you there, just there in the brush," said Richard. "Sorry, I didn't realize you and the horse did not see me," replied Sophia as Richard assessed this girl with bright red hair, slate gray eyes, and freckles. Richard noticed her horse just at the edge of the pasture, grazing happily on plentiful grasses. "You must be Richard Hawk, then, our new neighbor. Are you one with manners or a savage?" asked Sophia. Remember, she's listening to her parents saying that they're trying to buy their way into society. He's a retired admiral, he has a lot of money, he buys his estate. She doesn't realize it's Sir James and it's Lady Anne. So they have perfectly valid titles. In addition to that, they're always invited to the royal court, where her parents are baron and baronesses, but they're never invited. They're just part of society, but they're on the outside. So who's playing society and who's in society? Richard gets to meet her. She gets to ride Fire and the pasture. She falls in love with Fire, and so that begins this friendship, which turns eventually into fondness, which eventually in the book turns into love and all the different things that Richard will have to go through if he were ever asked to marry her. And of course, that's going to happen. That's part of the book. It's a romance, right? So that's part of what happens in the early stages of Sofia and Richard. That's part of what the book tells.
I love it. I love it. You know, Tim, I want to spend some time. Let's talk about character development. I'm curious, how did you approach developing these characters in a way that honored Jane Austen's original archetype characters, but did it in a way where it was developed in a completely unique and original way for yourself and for your narrative?
It's a really great question. In fact, that is the question. So, because I'm writing in that Regency time frame, which is the time frame that Jane Austen was writing, to make sure that I was understanding the rules of society, right? Yeah. So here's an example. How did James and Anne meet? So Anne is part of aristocracy. She comes from the village of Mere, which is near in Somerset, which is near Glastonbury. And Charlton is right next to Glastonbury. So that's why they both want to do it. So how did they meet? They met as children because of their proximity and wealth. But Anne and her family were aristocracy, and her parents said, "You can never marry James because he's from a wealthy merchant family," right? And so the rules are like, you can't cross that barrier. He doesn't have a title, so you have to marry within titles, right? So that's part one. Yeah. What happened was Richard goes away one year as they grow up,
first of all, before we even Richard going away, Anne and James grow up together and spend the summers together because there aren't very many in town here, the aristocracy. So they kind of enjoy each other, knowing full well that they can never be like married. One year, Richard goes away. His dad puts him into the Royal Naval Academy. He comes back some years later, a captain and a knight, and he has money, right? And so the dad realizes his daughter's unhappy, and he finds out a little bit about Richard and talks to him and says, come to dinner tonight. In the back of his mind, he's trying to figure out, is there still a spark between his daughter Anne and Richard now, not Richard, James, right? And he's trying to figure out if there's still a spark there. He doesn't realize there's a bonfire. They're going to get married very quickly, and that begins that relationship. So the whole development of the character is very important because you have to put that in the context of that time frame and the rules associated with it. How they could actually come. Yeah, that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, absolutely. People, again, you know where you gotta go. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's tffig.com. This one is called Sofia and Richard. The other one is the Lady Anne Elliot. These are books that you want to get lost in. Tim, what I love about these books is it's so much larger than just books for Jane Austen fans. Obviously that it is. But anybody, regardless of particular interests and backgrounds, will be able to find so much benefit in the journey that they're going to be embarking upon with your books. I'm telling you, it's truly something impressive that you've done here. My follow-up question that I want to go into now as we start to segue, you've already started to go into this slightly, so it's a great lead off that you've put us on. But are there certain sequences, are there certain scenes or dialogues found within your book that directly pay homage to Jane Austen's previous works? If so, talk to us a little bit more about them.
You read some of this. So I'll tell you one scene. Because there's so many in there, like one scene is not a big deal.
Yeah.
So, not Anne. Sophia is a reader of the modern novel.
Mm-hmm.
That day, the modern novel, or one of the modern novelists, was Jane Austen. She could not write her name as the author, so she just would always put the author of this novel or the author of that novel. And it wasn't until she passed away that her family said, we're going to put her name on the novels so that people know who she was. Well, Sophia has been trying to, in this part of the book, which is later in the book,
mm-hmm.
she's trying to get her hands on a book called Pride and Prejudice. She hears it's fabulous, and she can't get it in town. And she's been waiting for it to show up in the bookstore, but every time she goes there, it's sold out. She says, look, before you can get the book, it's already sold out. I have a long list, so she's on the list. It's going to be a while. Well, anyway, James and Richard have to go to town. So on naval admiralty business, and he has to go to the royal court. So he's going to take Richard with him. So Richard says to his dad while he's there and in town, meaning London, right? They never said London, they always said town.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I want to buy gifts for Mother or Sophia. And he asks his dad if he could get this for Mother and get a novel, a particular novel that Sophia has been talking to him about called Pride and Prejudice. And so the dad makes arrangements with the housekeeper and they get the gifts. So what happens is he comes back and the mom says, we have to ask Lady Victoria if she can have this novel. We can't just give it to her.
Right.
We have to have permission. So sends a note to Victoria and she says, I have this novel called Pride and Prejudice. It's a modern novel. And can Richard give this as a gift to your daughter? And so what happens is, mom says, I think that'll be okay, and I want to read that myself. I understand that this novelist is just tremendous, and shouldn't be any problem. And so that's the Jane Austen connection. And so later on in the story, Princess Jenny, who's part of the royal family, is staying at Charlton at the days before the ball, and she finds out that Sophia has this novel and she's read it. She's been wanting to read it, but she doesn't have time. But now that she's staying a couple of days and resting at Charlton, she asks Sophia to borrow that novel. And that novel is an important aspect in the story because not only is it a Jane Austen connection, but it also connects Sofia and Richard to the royal family. Because now, Princess Jenny is reading it and she's discussing it with them. And the mom's sitting there with Anne saying, I can't believe my daughter's talking to the princess of the realm here. I couldn't have imagined it. And that now begins to link Victoria and Anne. They almost become sisters in that sense. Beginning, we're beneath to now we're almost sisters, in almost one family. Does that kind of make sense to you?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, absolutely. And follow-up question that I want to go into, sticking along those same lines here, Tim, I'm curious, when you were writing this book, it clearly, as I've mentioned, as you've mentioned, this was birthed out of Jane Austen's novels, right? Well, I'm curious, when you're writing now for a contemporary, for a modern audience, how do you fit some of the modern societal norms while still maintaining the Regency period, the time period in which the initial novels by Jane Austen were written? How did you balance those two and bring it forward to a contemporary modern day audience, Tim?
That was a challenge. So
yeah,
I tried to. What I did was I looked at a number of different factors. How do I communicate in a Regency-esque kind of way, right? The notion of a Regency romance story, right? While at the same time communicating today's language. So I had to look at the scale and say, if I use today's language, it'll invalidate the Regency story because using today's wording language. If I go 100% Regency, a majority of people looking at the book would say, I don't understand what they're saying because the wording is different than today. So I had to find a range that would allow me to use aspects of today's language, right? But have that Regency-esque kind of notion to it. So there's certain wording that I would use and other wording that I wouldn't use, if that makes sense. I focused in on the language as opposed to other cultural aspects. For instance, and those today, you walk up to someone and could say, oh, hello, I'm so-and-so, and I think you're really cute, and I'd like to, couldn't do that in those days. First of all, there was no phone, right? Most a female if you were a male, unless you were introduced by the family. And so these kinds of things, I tried not to break those kind of things, but the language piece of it, I felt like I could dial in and out necessarily, right? That helps you.
No, listen, I get it, man. And Tim, just to throw this out here, throw this little tidbit into the mix, depending on the situation, you probably still can't do that in certain instances today. I'm not going to go any further down that rabbit hole, people. You understand what I'm saying. You're picking up what I'm putting down. Okay, just be careful. Just be careful. But listen, Tim, as we start to close out here, man, I started off by saying this earlier. I can't leave it alone without bringing it up. I gotta talk about it. The title of your book is Sofia and Richard. Got that. Subtitle of Regency Romance. Got that. Tacked onto that subtitle is book 1. Well, Tim, it doesn't take a genius to be able to piece this together. If there's a book 1, it's naturally safe to assume that there's either a book 2 already put out or in creation. Well, Tim, let's close out here focusing on the future. What's upcoming for you?
Right. So when I write, and we talked about this prior interview, that I actually see in my mind like it's a movie, and I don't always know like the end state. Because I can only see as I go along. So I reached the point where I was like, look, I have 100,000 plus words already, and I know that I'm not ending it soon. So I worked out, okay, I'm going to have to land here at some point for book 1. And there is a book 2. And book 2 is going to continue book 1. So I will tell you a little bit about. I'll tell you what happens toward the end of book 1 at high level, so I don't give too much away. So Richard graduates from the Naval Academy, the Royal Naval Academy. He goes on a voyage with a captain who was specifically chosen because his father's an admiral, that he is trained properly, eventually becomes an asset to the Royal Navy as a captain. Eventually, his career, they're trying to map out his career. That's what they do. If you have from previous family who have done very well at the Royal, the captain dies a month into the voyage. Wow. Richard becomes interim captain. His dad, since he was 10 years old, has been training him in terms of command, navigation, how to manage a ship, how to manage crews, how to approach battles. He's been teaching him because his son was getting assessed by the Royal Navy yearly to determine what he's learning, how much time will be taken off the 4 years. So when he entered the Royal Navy Academy, they would have assessed him already, said, we're going to take off so much time, and you just spend this amount of time at the academy. So Richard is ready to be a captain. It's just that it wasn't in the cards at the time. It was unexpected. He's the captain of the HMS Ajax, one of the most powerful warships submarine. He's interim captain. He's on his way to India, Port Bombay, to spend months there on mission. That happens. That gets to the end of the book, and that mission gets completed successfully. And eventually, he is told, "You are now the captain of the Ajax," causing a lot of problems with some of the other captains, saying he's way too young. Why are you doing this? It's just because his dad's an admiral. But book 2 he gets into the West Indies, or the Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Caribbean. He's the only warship there, and there are pirates everywhere. And it's hindering trade, which is tobacco, cotton, all the kinds of things that are going on between England and West Indies. And the other warships are all taken up the East Indies. So he has to figure out how he's going to take these pirates out. He does some amazing things, and we'll see. Book 2 is going to be amazing.
Listen, I have no doubt that that is going to be the case. And I know you all listening out there, you have no doubts either. Okay, but I'm going to re-impress it for you just one last time to make sure you got it. We're here on the line with the magnificent T.F. Fig. We just finished discussing his impressive book, Sofia and Richard, A Regency Romance, Book 1. Be on the lookout for Book 2 the moment it becomes available. Like he said, he's written down 100,000 words. I'm hoping there's a book 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Keep on going, Tim. We want to be a part of it, man. People, again, last time he was here with us, we discussed his impressive book, The Lady Anne Elliot. This time with Sofia and Richard. Next time will be one of the other impressive books that he comprises. But again, it's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, tffig.com. Head on over there. Get lost in these magnificent books. Whether you're a Jane Austen fan or not, I promise you, these books have things you're going to want to get involved in. Tim, this has been a true pleasure, man. An absolute honor and such a delight. As the first interview was, this one followed through in the exact same way, which is, of course, no surprise to me, man. You are a truly impressive individual, and it was an absolute delight to have you here with us as a guest again. Looking forward to the next discussion. But in the interim, we truly appreciated it, man. Stay healthy, stay safe, and once again, thank you for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you for having me.